Hi everyone, holidays are coming up and that means travel. I know that in the times of COVID, your travel plans may be more restricted, and with numbers rising daily in the US, travel plans may be put on hold. But if you are planning on traveling or having loved ones who are immigrants coming to see you, the things I talk about in this video should help you develop safe travel plans for everyone. By way of introduction, I'm Mejer. I've been an attorney for over 15 years and an immigrant to the US for a whole lot longer than that. When I was a child, I came here with my family and I didn't speak English. I learned it by watching Sesame Street. My family found out the hard way by hiring an attorney who was happy to take their money but not so happy to help them. How frustrating and stressful the whole process can be. In fact, I almost lost my green card, and several of my family members did lose theirs. That's why my goal as your advocate is to transform your life by getting you the legal benefit you want so you can put your energy into other things besides getting legal status in the United States. I don't want anyone to lose their green card or other immigration benefit, or to get arrested and put into deportation proceedings, because they are going to see their loved ones. So, in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to explain how travel in the US might impact an undocumented person. I'm going to talk about how travel inside or outside the US might impact a green card holder. And I'm going to talk about traveling into the US as a visa holder so that you can make wise decisions and hopefully see your loved ones at this special time of year. First, I want to talk about traveling as a person without legal status, sometimes called undocumented or illegal. If you are traveling, no matter your method of travel, without a legal status, you can be detained at any time and put into removal proceedings. This has been happening more and more during the Trump administration. So I want you to be aware it is always possible. Prior to this administration, Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, could stop anyone within 100 miles of a border and ask to see documentation that proves they are legally in the US. Since this administration came into power, they changed that to allow CBP to stop anyone pretty much anywhere in the US and ask those questions. What about if you want to fly to see your family within the US? Anyone who boards a plane in the US must have a valid governmental ID. This ID could be a foreign passport. Beginning October 2020, you were supposed to be required to have a real ID to board a plane. It has to have a star on it. But DHS extended this requirement for a real ID identification for a year. So after October 1st, 2021, your ID will have to be real ID compliant. For some airlines, they may accept a state ID card. These should also be real ID compliant when that is required. When I say valid, I mean it must be issued by a government agency and it can't be expired. If it is expired, it will not be accepted and you will not be able to board the plane or even enter the airport past the screening area, usually. If you are flying, I recommend you talk to the airline and the airport you are departing from in both directions so that whatever ID you have meets their ID requirements. What about traveling by bus, car, or train? If you are traveling by car, there's always a chance you can be stopped by local police. Local police are only allowed to ask you questions about your legal status if they have been deputized by DHS to do so. There are many jurisdictions who have done this. We can't say it won't happen. All the information I share today is to help you in this or other situations. If you are stopped by the police, the best policy is to be respectful. Do not argue, lie, run, or be combative. A police officer can use force if they feel threatened, so don't do anything that they might see as threatening. You do not need to give them information that they don't ask for. As I mentioned, do not lie to the police. Do keep in mind, you don't need to tell them you don't have legal papers. You have the right to remain silent. Use that right. If you are arrested by the police, you have the right to an attorney. Ask for one before talking to the police. Do not sign any documents the police give you before your attorney reviews them. When you meet with your attorney, ask them if they have experience with immigration matters or if they can consult with an attorney who does. Any criminal proceedings against you can impact your immigration goals, so it is important to make sure you're protecting those. Your attorney should know how to best protect you. What about if you are a passenger in a car? Do you need to answer questions if the police stops the driver? While the police do need a reason to stop someone, they can question anyone in the vehicle. In some states, you must provide your name if asked or your ID. If you are a passenger, you only must provide your ID. You do not have to say where you were born. You do not have to answer how you entered the US or if you are a citizen of the US or any other country. You do not need to answer their questions, but if you don't, you may be detained and or arrested. You should say out loud, "I am invoking my right to silence." Police do know that they shouldn't ask you questions after you say this, but it is not a guarantee they won't keep on trying. You can always ask the police if you can leave, and if they say yes, you should slowly and calmly walk away from the situation. Can police look through your car or your belongings? If you are stopped or in a car that is stopped by the police, you do not have to consent to allow them to search your car, your belongings, or your person. You should say, "No, I do not consent to your search. No, I don't give you permission to search me or my car." If they search anyway, do not fight with them or resist the search. A good attorney will get anything they discover thrown out of court. Do you need to show your ID if asked? In some states, you don't need to show your ID if you are asked to provide it. But again, it depends on the state. Know that if you refuse to show your identification, you may be detained and or arrested. They're going to fingerprint you to see if you have an order of arrest. What should you do if you are in removal proceedings? If you are not in custody, you can travel even if you are in removal proceedings. Travel inside the US I'm talking about. You will need to show your notice to appear form I-862 and your foreign ID. When you have a form I-862 and notice to appear, it means you've already been interviewed by an immigration official, so it is unlikely they're going to detain you unless you're arrested for some other offense. If you are stopped by the authorities or worse, detained or arrested, you want to make it as easily as possible for your family to get you the help you need. Memorize important phone numbers. Have all necessary papers such as birth certificates, proof of residence, etc. together in one place so they can access it. You may want to think about adding another person to your bank account in case they need to access your money for you. You would only want to do this with someone you absolutely trust, because otherwise they could steal all your money. Also, if you are in a relationship or married, you need to make sure your partner is on your lease, utility bills, and other important accounts so that they can take care of them if you remain in custody or worse, are deported. Police are not supposed to listen to phone calls between someone who is arrested and their attorney. They can and often do listen to phone calls that you might make to other people. Do not share information that you want to keep private on any phone calls while in police or ICE custody. What about if you are traveling by bus, like a Greyhound? You do need a valid ID if you are traveling by bus. There have been instances of CBP and ICE boarding buses in the past few years and asking to see ID. They have also questioned people about their legal status. You do not need to answer their questions about your legal status. You may need to show them your ID. If you do not show a valid ID or refuse to answer their questions, they may detain or arrest you. You can still request to talk to your attorney if this happens. What do you need if you travel by train in the US as an undocumented person? So glad you asked. If you're traveling by local trains, so a short distance, you don't usually need to have any ID. You should have one anyway, but you don't normally need anything other than your ticket. If you are traveling by Amtrak, so this usually is across the country or through several states, you do need to have a valid government ID, but they don't often check it. They usually just scan your ticket. All the same things apply if you encounter police when traveling in a car, a train, or a bus. You do have to give your correct name. You have to provide an ID if required by the local jurisdiction. You can refuse to answer any questions and refuse to be searched, but that does not mean you will stop it from happening. If you are arrested, you will need an attorney, criminal, immigration, ideally one that does both. Do not answer any questions or sign any documents if you are arrested until after speaking to an attorney. We have 2 resources that may help if you encounter the police or ICE. One is our rec card. It tells you what to do if you are stopped by the police or ICE. If you'd like a copy, please comment below. We'll send your information. We'll get your information and we can send you one, either by mail or electronically, free of charge. The other is an app we read about called Mejer. We have not tried this app, but we're going to link to it below. From what we have read, it allows you to set an emergency list of contacts that if you are stopped by ICE, you can verbally tell your phone and it will send a message to those contacts and will start live streaming the event to them via your phone. It will also send them a text with your location. It is created, licensed, and managed by the ACLU of Texas. Last week, I talked quite a bit about what happens to green card holders who abandon their green card. I'm not going to repeat everything in that video, but I will link to it below. It is mostly geared towards green card holders who leave the US for too long. If you are a green card holder, whether you are a conditional or a permanent green card holder, you should not have any issues when traveling within the US as long as you have government ID and a copy of your green card to show if requested. If you leave the US, you should watch the video from last week to know what you should or should not do. As a citizen, you have no travel restrictions other than COVID ones. Within or without the US, it is why I always recommend that you become a US citizen as soon as possible after getting your green card. Now let's talk about visa holders. Visa holders have different restrictions than a green card holder or even a person who is undocumented. Visa holders might include a B1, B2 tourist visa or a K1 fiance visa, as well as others, but those are the 2 main ones, so they're the ones I'm really focused on and talking about today. As I've shared before, when you come to the US, you are inspected at the border. Even with a visa, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, can refuse to let you enter. What are some things that might make them turn you away? One that we've been seeing more in the last few years is people who enter too often and stay for long periods of time. So if someone comes in for 3 to 6 months and only leaves for a month and does this several times, they may think you are trying to stay here permanently or you are working here. So we have seen Customs and Border Patrol stopping people at the airport, turning them away and taking away their visa. Of course, if you are carrying anything illegal, they would probably arrest you and not allow you entry. If you have been waiting for a visa since March 2020, when the Department of State suspended visa services, unfortunately, State Department has no additional information about when this will resume. It wouldn't surprise me if it wouldn't reopen until Biden becomes president. Much of the delay is because it is dependent on the consulates and embassies outside the US, and they each are opening based on their individual circumstances. At least that's what they tell us. What about if you are in the US and your non-immigrant visa has expired? Non-immigrant visas can sometimes be extended with Form I-539, application to extend or change non-immigrant status. Usually visas are good for several years, but the validity of your visa isn't what you reference to determine if you are here legally. When you enter the US, a stamp is put on your passport or entered into the system by CBP that says you are allowed to stay until a certain date. You have to abide by that date. It means you have to leave before that date. Sometimes instead of a date, it will say D/S. That means duration of status. You can stay in the US up to the date or through your D/S date. You can sometimes get an extension of this date, but it takes several months to process, probably even longer now with COVID. And overstaying your authorized period may impact your ability to re-enter the US in the future. What about if you can't see your fiance within 2 years of your interview because of COVID? I've gotten this question a lot lately. And I've recently talked about visiting with your fiance in a video that we're going to link below. There are exceptions to the 2-year requirement of having seen each other for religious or cultural reasons for not meeting within the 2-year period. As far as we are aware, there have not yet been any exceptions granted for not being able to see each other due to COVID, but we will be making those demands. The law says you must meet within 2 years of your application. So if you applied and the application process taken longer than expected, you should be okay. Of course, we can't guarantee that. President Trump signed a proclamation on April 22nd, which has been extended through the end of the year, up until December 31st, 2020. That proclamation said that no immigrant visas will be issued by the Department of State, with few exceptions. These exceptions include lawful permanent residents, immigrants seeking to enter as healthcare professionals, spouses, children, and prospective adopted children of U.S. citizens, and certain special immigrant visa applicants. Under COVID, all routine immigrant visa appointments have been canceled. If regular operations resume, the only people who will be scheduled for an appointment must fall under one of these exemptions. Keep in mind that another presidential proclamation, 9996, limits travel to the U.S. from specific countries, including the Schengen area, 26 European countries. If you are issued a visa and are coming from one of these areas, you must fall under an accepted category to be able to travel to the U.S. So what if my fiancé visa expires because of the restrictions? Well, fiancé visas cannot be extended, but if you can't travel during the validity period due to circumstances beyond your control, you can request a visa be reissued. You will need to contact the consulate that issued the visa to do that. You might have to pay for you might need another medical exam, you may have to pay another visa fee, so keep that in mind. Let's jump back to talking about traveling in the U.S. as a visa holder. Most forms of travel will require a valid ID. This can be your foreign passport. If you plan on driving, depending on the state you are driving through, you may need an IDP, an international driving permit, and a valid driver's license from your home country. There is no international driver's license, but you do need a license from your country. You cannot get this permit in the U.S., so you must obtain it before coming to the U.S. It simply translates your license into multiple languages, so it can be read and understood. Usually, if you want to rent a car, you will need your license and that permit as well as insurance. If you are traveling in the U.S., we recommend that you make a copy of your passport's biographic page, U.S. visa, and admission stamp or I-94 admissions number. Then, if you lose any of them, you'll have a copy, which makes it easier to get them replaced. What about if your passport is soon to expire? You must have a passport that is valid for 6 months beyond the period of your intended stay. Usually this means 9 months, presuming 90-day stay plus 6 months. If it is going to expire before that time, we recommend you replace your passport before you travel. Renew it, extend it, whatever the terminology you want to use. What do you have to have when you enter the U.S.? Well, besides a valid visa and a passport, as already mentioned, if you are arriving by air or by sea, you must have a ticket that is valid, within a year from the date of your entry coming out of the country. If you are arriving by land, which would be difficult during COVID as our borders are closed, you must prove you have financial solvency as well as a permanent residence to return home to. You have to be admissible to the U.S., meaning there's nothing in your past that makes you ineligible. Do not work while you're in the U.S. unless you have valid employment authorization document. It shouldn't need to say, but follow all the laws. That's everything you need to know about traveling this coming holiday season. If you are an undocumented individual or if you have a non-immigrant visa, if you have additional questions that we didn't cover, please put them below in the comments and we'll try to answer them for you. If you want to achieve legal status, now is the time to do it. Get in line. Call us today to get started. Thanks to everyone who has watched this. If you have questions, put them below. Please like and subscribe to the page so you'll be notified when we post new videos or updates. Until next time, stay healthy and be well.